Welcome back to another one of my videos. If you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Lotta, and today I'm going to show you how to make these raspberry poppy seed slices. Now the first thing we need to make is our poppy seed sponge cake so we can get that cooled off. So for our sponge cake, you're going to need 3 room temperature eggs, 75 grams of sugar with a pinch of salt, 1 good splash of vanilla extract, 75 grams of flour, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and 50 grams of poppy seeds. Now we're going to start by just whisking together our eggs, sugar, salt, and vanilla until that's super light and fluffy before gently folding in our dry ingredients. Now that the egg mixture is super light and fluffy, I'm going to go ahead and gently sieve in and then fold in my dry ingredients. Now when I'm making a bigger sponge cake, oftentimes I'll fold in my dry ingredients into batches. That way it just helps make sure that it's not weighing down my egg mixture. But because it's only a small sponge cake today, I'm just going to throw it all in and then it should be fine. Now again, you want to make sure that you're not over mixing your sponge cake because that's going to whisk out some of that air that you've tried so hard to keep in your sponge cake. So once it's combined, you can just go ahead and transfer it into your pre-lined tin. At this point, our sponge cake can wander into the oven that's been preheated to 180 degrees Celsius or 360 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's going to bake for about 20-25 minutes. Now the first part of our filling is going to be our raspberry filling. So for that, I'm using 300 grams of frozen and thawed raspberries, 20 grams of sugar, and the juice of 1 small lemon. Now you can also use fresh raspberries if you so choose. Either way works. If you are using frozen raspberries, I recommend just thawing them or just microwaving them for a couple increments just to get them to be nice and soft again, so it's going to be a lot easier to puree them. That being said, we're basically just going to go ahead and puree our raspberries until we have a nice smooth consistency, and then we're going to sieve it to make sure that all the little seeds get out. If you don't mind having seeds in your filling, you can skip this step and just move right on to the next step. Now that we've added the remaining ingredients, we can go ahead and bring this up to a boil on medium heat or so. And we're basically just going to let this simmer a little bit to let it reduce. Now I'm going to take out 3 or 4 teaspoons of our thickened raspberry sauce, and I'm going to set that aside for my glaze at the very end. Now I'm going to let the rest of my raspberry sauce cool off while we get the rest of our filling started. Now for the rest of the filling, you're going to need 200 milliliters of heavy cream, 200 grams of yogurt, 200 grams of Greek yogurt, 1 good splash of vanilla extract, 25 grams of powdered sugar, and 5 grams of gelatin. Now I'm going to start by just letting my gelatin bloom with a little splash of water, and I'm going to set that aside for about 5 minutes or so. Now in the meantime, we can go ahead and whisk up our cream until we have some nice stiff peaks, and we can also go ahead and mix together the remaining ingredients as well. Now that our gelatin has thickened, we're going to mix it into our semi-cooled off raspberry mixture. Now, if it's not mixing in completely, you might have to transfer this back to the stove and heat it on low heat or so. You really just want to make sure that you're not boiling your gelatin, because else it's not going to thicken up your cream, which is obviously what you want. But if it's not completely mixing in and your raspberry mixture has cooled off a little bit too much, you can just put it back on the stove just for a little bit on low heat, just to make sure that our gelatin is completely mixed in. At this point, we need to temper our filling to make sure that our gelatin doesn't form streaks when we add it to our cold yogurt mixture. So essentially all we're going to do is add dollops of our yogurt mixture to our raspberry filling and whisk that in, and that's going to help bring down the temperature, and eventually we can transfer our entire raspberry mixture into our yogurt mixture and give that a good whisk as well. Now the last thing we need to do is fold in our whipped cream. At this point we can get to layering. So I already went ahead and cut my sponge into 2 layers, and our filling is also complete. So I'm going to use the tin that I used for my sponge cake. I'm just going to start with a layer of my sponge, add half of my raspberry filling, and then repeat with the second half. This can now wander into the fridge for at least 4 to 6 hours to let the gelatin set, and in the meantime we can prep our glaze that's going to go on top. Now the last thing we need to make is our red glaze that's going to go at the top of our cake. So for that, we're going to use the leftover raspberry puree that we set aside, 200 milliliters of water, 2 teaspoons of sugar, and 1 red glaze package. Alternatively, you can always just use about 2 tablespoons of cornstarch instead, but if you have thawed goose, use that. Now we're basically just going to add everything into a pot and bring it up to a boil until it's nice and thick, and then we're going to let it cool off ever so slightly before pouring it onto the top of our cake. At this point, our cake has set completely, so we can carefully remove it out of our tin. At this point, you can cut your raspberry slices into as many or as little slices as you want. I think I'm going to do 16 slices, but usually with this size, I also do 8 bigger slices, but I want to switch it up, so we're going to do 16 somewhat smaller slices today. Now at this point, you can leave your raspberry slices just the way that they are, or you can decorate with a little bit of whipped cream and some fresh raspberries. And there's our raspberry slices. So that's going to be everything for today's video. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up or write me a comment down below. And as always, the whole recipe is going to be in the description box as well.